So childhood obesity, serious medical condition that affects children and adolescents. And basically, the basic definition is when a child is above the normal weight for his or her age and height. But I'm going to ask you, what really is childhood obesity, and how do you define obesity in kids?
Well, obesity is the same. The process is the same for whether we're talking about adults or kids. Mm-hmm. And the way we quantify it is by something called a BMI or body mass index. And for adults, a BMI or body mass index of 30 or above is considered to be obese.
Okay.
And 25 to 30 is considered overweight.
So 25 to 30 is overweight and above 30 is obese.
And that index, what it is, it's the ratio of the weight over the height, the weight in kilograms over the height in meters squared. That's how we calculate the index.
So does a pediatrician calculate it, or is it generally done routinely in schools?
Usually the pediatrician does. And a lot of times, you may have seen when you go to your pediatrician, a lot of times when you use electronic medical records, you'll see a graph that we use to plot out their weight and height.
Right.
And a lot of those programs just calculate it for you automatically. When you plot them on their growth curve, it'll plot the BMI also. And then we actually have a curve, which we're using now, is a curve for the BMI, where we plot the BMI in addition to just the weight and the height.
Okay.
So in kids, we define it a little bit differently. We still use a BMI, but in kids, we consider them to be overweight if they're over the 95th percentile for their BMI.
Okay.
And they're considered to be overweight if they're between the 85th to 95th percentile for their age.
Now, let's talk a little bit about these growth charts, because these are developed using, I guess, American kids, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's different kinds. There's some from the CDC, and then there's some from the World Health Organization. So those aren't necessarily just for American kids.
Okay.
So they're basically just guidelines where they give us trends of, population heights and weights in the populations.
Okay.
So there's ranges we're looking at. So it doesn't have to be exact. So I think for the most part, whatever your cultural background is, I think it's fine to use those curves, and it would still apply. But your pediatrician would take into account, if you had parents that were really short, or you came from a shorter or smaller family, you may take that into account.
Right. Like my pediatrician, every time I go and complain, I'm like, my child is too short. And he says, Mrs. Shafi, just look at you.
Yeah, he's right. So your height and dad's height, and then sometimes it's grandparents as well. So that all contributes to, the child's height as well.
Okay. So childhood obesity has more than doubled in children and quadrupled in adolescents in the past 30 years. And the percentage of children aged 6 to 11 in the US who were obese increased from 7% in 1980 to nearly 18% in 2012. And similarly, the percentage of adolescents aged 12 to 19 years who were obese increased from 5% to nearly 21% over the same period. These are staggering numbers. So this is a huge, huge problem.
Yeah, this is obesity in general, whether we're talking about kids or adults, is the number one public health threat in this country.
Wow.
So, obesity leads to things like heart disease and diabetes and other things, which are, which is probably one of the most common problems we see in adults now, and one of the major reasons that people visit their doctor, or that contributes to healthcare costs. So, and for kids, it's the same thing, because a lot of the obesity, a lot of times it starts in childhood. Kids who are obese, the later they are obese, like the older they are, the more likely to be obese as adults.
Okay, so you are answering a lot of my questions. Can you tell by simply looking at a child, that they are obese?
You can tell, but we still like to quantify it.
You like to quantify it?
Yeah, with the body mass index.
Okay.
So you can get a good idea just by looking at a child if they're overweight or not. But we still like to go by those numbers and to kind of use those guidelines that we mentioned earlier.
So the percentiles and then the body mass
Exactly.
index. So that's
Right.
how it's diagnosed. Okay.
Right.
Now, at what age do kids have a tendency to put on weight?
It can be any age. It depends on what their lifestyle and what their dietary habits are like. So I see kids as young as 2 or 3 that are overweight. And, you can see it even a little bit younger than that. So basically when they're eating table foods and they're can make choices as far as what they want to eat, that's when we tend to see problems with their weight.
Okay.
So as young as 2 to 3, but you can see it from there all the way up to, their teenage years.
So, and as human beings, we love fat babies and we coo and go all gaga over them and stuff. So is it something that we are perpetuating in our kids, that we're actually contributing to this kind of public health crisis?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's a simple answer. So one thing, though, about the babies, you mentioned about them being chubby and the cute fat babies. So that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be obese as adults, because a lot of that's, kids their birth weight, they may be high for different reasons. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be overweight when they get older.
Okay.
But if we're talking about toddlers, like 2 or 3 year olds, then yes, definitely the parents are contributing to, if they're overweight, contributing to that, and especially what they're eating.
Okay. What about around puberty? Because some kids tend to put on weight around puberty as well. So is that something that we need to be a little careful, that age group we need to be a little careful about?
Yeah, I mean, at their teenage years, they're more able to make choices as far as what they're going to eat in school. So you don't have as much control over, what they're eating. You do have some, but not as much as a toddler and what kind of activities they're doing. But they actually, from kids I see, they actually tend to improve because they go through a growth spurt. So they kind of even out a little bit more. So if they're a little overweight, when they get a little bit taller, provided they don't gain as much weight at the same rate, then that helps improve their BMI.
Okay. And what about genetics? So if the parents are overweight or obese, does that mean that the kids will also have a genetic tendency for that?
Yeah, it does increase the risk. So having a obese parent doubles the risk of the child being obese.
Doubles the risk. Okay.
And some of that is genetic, but a lot of that is environmental, like the kind of lifestyle that the family has and what kind of dietary habits they have. But there is a genetic component to obesity.
Okay.
It's not just one gene; it's multifactorial. It's a interaction between multiple genes. So there's not just one gene that you say if you have this, then you're going to be obese. So, but that's a hot topic in research, and they're researching different things as far as genetic factors or contributions to being overweight, so they can potentially come up with solutions for that or treatments for that. But it's not, like I said, just one thing. It's usually multiple genes. And it doesn't mean that if you have that gene that you're going to be overweight. You may be at a little bit higher risk for being obese, but if you have an active lifestyle and you eat well, then you won't be overweight. So it's not well defined. It's a complex interaction of genetics and also your environment.
Okay. So genetics and environment, and that brings us to our next question, that what really does cause childhood obesity? Is it just simply the diet, that kind of food that you're eating? Is it simply a lack of exercise? Can there be medical issues for this? What is it? Or is it a combination?
Yeah, it's a combination of all of those. Basically, what causes obesity, at the simplest level, it's an energy imbalance.
Okay.
So the calories or the energy that you're putting into your body, you're not expending all that energy.
Okay.
So when you have excess energy, your body stores it as fat. So that's why people are obese at the simplest level, adults or kids.
Isn't that interesting? And then somehow when you have these kids who are very, very energetic, everybody says, oh my God, you're so energetic, but they tend to be the skinniest people. They tend to burn it off, I guess.
Yeah, most kids do. They're very active, but if you're eating if you're constantly eating bad, then even kids sometimes they can't keep up with that.
Isn't it just constantly eating also?
It's constantly eating, making bad food choices, and then kids are less active than they used to be now too, so which that contributes to it. So they're spending more time indoors, spend more time on computer and video games and things like that. So all of that kind of plays into it.
What about the rigorous curriculum and homework that the kids are getting? I mean, they're spending 4 or 5 hours a day, just sitting and doing their homework.
Right.
What do you? I mean, that
definitely
contributing factor?
Yes, yeah, definitely it does contribute to it. And also another trend we've seen in schools is they've decreased recess and PE time. I'm not really sure why, but I think they're trying to focus more on academics, things like that, and they keep cutting down more PE time. It used to be where it'd be every day. Now it's maybe 2 or 3 days a week in a lot of schools.
Right.
And recess.
After 6th grade, you don't have recess.
They don't have recess. A lot of times, I remember when I was younger, we had a recess twice a day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon.
The good old days.
Yes, the good days. But now it's just, you're lucky if you have it once a day and then keep shortening the time. So, that plays a role in it. And then, of course, the homework does too. So if you're getting tons of homework for teenagers and they're spending hours at home, then that gives them less time that they can go out and play or be active.
And also one thing I've seen is that, kids are doing homework and then they have junk food around them. So it's like they're sedentary, but they're also putting the wrong things in their mouth at the same time, all those Cheetos and chips and things like that, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's a common thing in kids when it could be homework. Sometimes it's sitting in front of the TV and they're snacking on junk food like that. So snacking is besides just eating unhealthy, snacking is one thing that can be dangerous in kids too, because a lot of those calories they get by constant snacking on unhealthy foods throughout the day.
So what should a balanced diet entail? Is it like 6 small meals? Because we keep hearing different things. So is it 6 small meals a day? Is it 3 meals and 2 snacks? What's the ideal combination?
3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and no more than 2 snacks a day, 2 small snacks a day.
Okay.
2 healthy snacks a day, preferably.
Okay.
So that would be ideally, the meal schedule you should have, and it'll vary according to, the age of the person, and maybe depending on certain. It may not be exactly like that all the time, but those are general guidelines.
What's the most important meal of the day?
You want me to say breakfast, right?
I'm waiting for that.
Well, I think they're all important, but breakfast is important to get you going in the morning.
Okay.
One trend that I see commonly in obese kids is they often skip breakfast, and it seems like all their meals are kind of like fit into a span of like 4 or 5 hours after they get home from school. A lot of times they don't even eat much at lunch. They may eat at lunch and then they eat a big snack after school, then they eat dinner, then they snack again. So that's a common trend I see in kids. They're eating a bunch of high-calorie meals in a short time period, and they're not eating breakfast a lot of times. They're spreading out their meals throughout the course of the day.
After the age of 1, then pediatricians recommend that you switch from whole milk to...
At 1, you start on whole milk.
Whole milk, right. See, I've forgotten. And then at some point, you switch to low fat, right? Yeah,
usually after age 2, we'll typically switch them to 2% milk.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but at 1 year, we have them on whole milk because they need the extra fat and calories for their brain and eye development. So, but as they get a little bit older, then we switch them to a little bit lower fat milk.
Okay.
So, that could be organic or non-organic milk. As far as the calories or the weight gain aspect of it, I don't think being organic versus non-organic will make that much of a difference as far as that part of it. There's other issues that you want to consider. I typically give my kids organic milk, and the reason for that is they don't have the hormones like she mentioned, which can affect children's growth. And also they don't use antibiotics, because a lot of times they give antibiotics to the animals to help fight off infections. So, and that breeds a lot of resistance towards different kinds. It breeds resistance to different kinds of bacteria. So there's other reasons where you may want to consider to give organic milk as opposed to just weight gain. But as far as, considering the fat content, typically after age 2, we do 2% milk.
Okay. So do these growth hormones contribute to obesity, or has that ever been, I'm sure it's been studied?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's been studied with a direct link to obesity. They've studied precocious puberty and things like that in kids being exposed to certain levels of hormones. But I'm not sure about the link with obesity and those kind of hormones in milk.
Okay. And we're talking about causes of childhood obesity. So looking at diet, we're talking about lack of exercise. Can there be medical issues that lead to obesity in children?
There can be. There are some diseases that can lead to obesity. Some common ones are hypothyroidism, Prader-Willi syndrome, Cushing syndrome. There's a handful of them, but they're not as common. I would say they make up only like 1% of the cases of obesity that we see.
Really?
Yeah, the vast majority of cases of obesity we see are related to diet and exercise, lack of exercise and unhealthy diet. Now we'll screen, usually when I have someone, we talked about plotting them out in a growth curve, and if they're overweight, then a lot of times I'll do some screening labs to check their cholesterol, and I'll check their thyroid and things like that. So we'll do a screening for some of those kind of things. I usually do that as a routine.
Okay.
But like I said, typically it's there, but it's not as common as these other causes of obesity that we talked about.
Okay. Excellent. And what about risk factors? What would be some of the risk factors for obesity?
Well, they revolve around basically three things that we talked about. One is the diet, is having an unhealthy diet. Two is lack of exercise. And then three is just kind of their lifestyles, what they're doing during the day, if it's things that are sedentary and they're not moving around. So as far as food, if they're eating a lot of high-calorie, high-fat foods, eating a lot of fast food, things like that, doing a lot of snacking throughout the day on unhealthy foods, then that contributes to it, to obesity. And then as far as lack of exercise, if they're spending a lot of time on TV or playing video games, then that contributes to it. That's actually a risk factor, is the amount of time you spend on TV. Really? Yeah. It increases the risk of the prevalence of obesity by 2% for every extra hour of TV viewing.
2%? Wow.
Yeah. So TV is a huge risk factor for obesity.
Okay.
As well as, and now I would include with TV all those other things.
Yes, all electronics.
Yeah, I would say screen time rather than TV, and that includes iPads, your smartphones, computer time on internet, video games, all those things. I'll lump it all together. Yeah, so all those contribute to it.
Okay, very good. Good to know. What about any psychological factors?
Yeah, there are some psychological factors that you have to consider in kids who are overweight. Sometimes kids who are depressed or they have stress or anxiety, a lot of times they cope by eating food. So that's something we see commonly in kids and even in adults as well. So that's one thing you have to be aware of. And sometimes, it becomes a vicious cycle because they get stressed and then they eat more. And then sometimes when they're overweight, they feel worse about themselves and they cope with it by eating more.
Another thing that I've observed is parents who are on the go the whole time, parents and kids who are on the go, shuttling their kids from here to there, one class to the other, and then they tend to eat in the car. Can that be a contributing factor?
Not necessarily eating in the car, but the fact that they're out and about usually means that they eat more fast food. So they're eating more fast food, and that definitely contributes to obesity. So they're eating a lot of junk food because it's quick and easy, and they're taking them from this practice to school or whatever it may be. So I would say that does. Now, one thing that does contribute to, or they've associated with, is lack of family meal time. So one of the recommendations to help combat some poor eating habits is eating meals together as a family as much as possible, at least like 3 or 4 times a week.
Okay, why is that so important? Because we hear it all the time, but what is it about that family meal time that is so important?
Well, one of the things is usually they're you're cooking the food at home. So that's a big thing because you're not eating fast food or not eating restaurant food or prepackaged food.
Okay.
And then the other part of it is just, creating a healthy environment. They tend to eat more slowly. Sometimes eating fast can make you, or eating slowly makes you feel full. Makes you feel full. So if you're eating real fast, sometimes you tend to eat more.
Okay.
So that's part of it as well. So there's a lot of factors, I think, involved with that. And part of it's just, kind of behavioral and not so much as far as, the actual foods that you're eating.
I'm laughing because I'm thinking of my little one. He's very, very skinny. And I was like, come on, hurry up. You take so long in all your meals. And he's like, Mom, you just don't understand the concept of chewing.
Yeah.
So he has an answer for everything. And he's very skinny. So I think I need to adopt his habits. Taking a long time over the meals. That's a very good point, slowing down.
And then one other thing is sometimes if you're not eating together as a family, sometimes people, they eat in front of TV. So sometimes you tend to eat more or you're kind of zoned out and eating junk food or whatever in front of the TV. So a lot of people, if they're that's a common thing we see in teens, is they'll be snacking in front of the TV.
Okay. And let's go back to a little bit about the kind of fast food. Now, reality, you have your kids to take them to practice and you have to pick up food along the way. What are some smart choices you can make?
Well, if you're going to eat fast food, then you want to go for probably the chicken, like grilled chicken, as opposed to eating hamburgers. Or if you are going to eat hamburgers, then maybe a smaller one as opposed to like the double or triple meat burgers. So, I think there are smart choices you can make. There's a lot of fast food places now have salads and things like that. I know McDonald's, they have like kids meals and they have apple slices and so they have healthy options that would be better than the typical nuggets and fries and things like that.
Hamburgers and stuff. Okay.
And then also the places that you eat also. So you could, maybe eat at places like Subway, which is not always healthy, but, depending on what you get, could maybe be better than eating a hamburger or chicken nuggets.
Okay. Sounds
But the best thing, though, is to eat at home, or maybe if you're on the go, you can maybe pack your lunch or pack some food if you know you're going to be out. So there's ways around it. I mean, eating fast food, I think, in our society is probably, for most parents, it's unrealistic to think that they're never going to eat fast food.
Right.
They're going to eat it. So when you do eat it, just try to keep it to a minimum and try to make healthy choices when you do eat there.
Okay. So basically fast food, very high oil content, lots of salt.
Yes, high in sodium, high in fat, saturated fats.
Okay.
So those are the two big things. It puts you at risk for hypertension and high cholesterol.
What about, now this is one of my pet peeves, is when kids, are watching television, they get bombarded by ads for like sugary cereals and things like that. How much of a contributing factor is that? And can you talk a little bit about soda and cereals and how about school lunches as well?
So you mentioned cereals, and that's a good point. There's a lot of sugary breakfast cereals, and they market it towards kids. Usually they show them the advertisements during cartoons and things like that when they know kids are watching. So a lot of those are very high in sugar, and they definitely contribute to obesity in kids.
Okay.
And some of them are so high, it's like eating candy for breakfast, like eating dessert for breakfast.
And if you look at the boxes, they're like, whole wheat and, healthy choice. And
right.
I mean, that's so misleading.
I mean, some of them they do have whole wheat. Some of them, they may have that, but it also has like 20 grams of sugar in it. So, so you have to read so basically what I would suggest is read the ingredient list, and the shorter the better.
Okay.
And usually the thing that's listed first, there's higher content of that in that item. And as you go down the list, it's less and less.
Okay.
So, I would pick items that have a shorter list, and you can look at the content in the order to see what they have higher amounts of, certain sugars, whatever it may be.
Okay.
But just to give you an example to prove your point, 1 cup of Honey Nut Cheerios has like 11 grams of sugar in it.
Okay.
Which is the same as eating like 3 Chips Ahoy cookies.
Whoa.
Yeah, so that's like giving your kids cookies for breakfast. And then if they have a soda for lunch, then that's even worse, or they eat other junk food during the day.
Okay.
So,
and see, we always thought that Cheerios are such a good healthy option.
well, the regular Cheerios are better, and there are options that are better, but the stuff that they're really marketing towards the kids, like the Fruit Loops and things like that.
Trust me, I've seen it all. The Tricks and the Fruit Loops and Cookie Crisp.
Yeah, so those ones, Cookie Crisps, it's in the name. It's basically little cookies that you're eating for breakfast. So, they're high in, a lot of them are high in sugar, not very healthy for kids. So just be wary about what you get for your kids. And typically, they put those high sugar stuff low in the grocery stores, so they're at eye level for the kids. So the healthy cereals usually are on top.
On the top.
Yeah, and the stuff that they're advertising for and that the kids know about are usually at their eye level.
What a science.
Yeah.
Okay. What about soda?
So the only thing worse than cereal is soda.
Okay.
So yeah, soda has no nutritional value whatsoever. Yes, and you're better off drinking something else, water or low-fat milk or fresh juice in moderation.
Okay.
So soda, the only nutritional value you may get from soda is a little water content you have from it. And they're high in sugar. So I think Coke or Sprite, things like that, they average somewhere between 39 to 45 grams of sugar.
Wow.
In a 12-ounce can.
Okay.
And for a child, the recommended intake is less than 12 grams a day. So that's triple the content for the day just from one soda.
Okay.
So and liquid calories is a big thing for kids who are overweight, and for adults too. They don't realize how many calories they get from things they drink. For adults, they may be like cappuccinos and coffees and things like that, sodas as well. But sodas is a big thing in kids. I think if you just cut out sodas and you didn't do anything else in your diet, just that, you'd lose a lot of weight during the course of a year if that's the only thing you did. Okay. So it's a lot of hidden calories that people don't account for, don't really think about.
What about fruit juices?
Fruit juices, you can get a lot of calories from that too, and they have a lot of sugar in it as well. But if you do juice, you should do 100% juice, and you should do it in moderation. So the recommendations from the AAP are less than 4 to 6 ounces for kids like 1 to age 6, and kids 7 and above should be somewhere less than 8 to 12 ounces a day.
Okay, very good. Very good to know.
I don't know if there's a direct link between lack of sleep and obesity that they've studied. Not that I know of, but in general, you should get enough sleep for your general well-being and just being healthy, particularly in kids. Their sleep requirements are higher than adults are. So I think it probably indirectly does help them to maintain a healthy lifestyle and keep their body running optimally. Okay.
All right. Very good. Very good. When you're talking about sodas, what do you think about diet sodas? Are they more healthy for the kids?
Not really.
Not really?
Yeah, they don't have the sugar content because they're low calories, but they use the artificial sweeteners. And sometimes the effect on the body of the artificial sweeteners is similar to having real sugar. But even diet sodas, they haven't found, from the studies they've done, they haven't found really decreased rates of obesity or things like heart disease and things like that. They still see those things even with diet sodas. And a lot of times people think because they're drinking diet sodas that they're not taking any calories, so they end up having more of it. They end up drinking a lot more than they typically would because they think, I'm not taking any calories from this. But there's other problems that people have. There's people who suffer from headaches and things like that from sodas or diet sodas.
Really?
Yeah, you can have problems with your teeth as well, erosion of the teeth. So cavities and regular sodas for kids. These are all detrimental effects of sodas besides just the sugar and the weight gain.
Now I've also seen a lot of tweens and teens are on the Starbucks bandwagon.
Right.
And they'll walk into school with a big, grande frappuccino and stuff. That seems to have a lot of sugar as well.
Right. We were talking about hidden calories in beverages, and that's a big one, coffee as well. So they have lots of sugar and they're getting a lot of calories from those things. So it's a lot of those frappuccinos and stuff. It's like eating a meal. Yeah, the amount of calories you get from it.
Right.
So you really need to be aware of the calories you're eating, not just from the food you eat, but from the things that you drink as well.
Okay, very good, very good. What would be some of the complications? So tell us why obesity and childhood obesity is so bad.
The complications that we see, or the problems we see from obesity, we mentioned some of them, but high blood pressure is one, high cholesterol.
Even a little child can have high blood pressure and high cholesterol.
Yeah, usually not the very little ones, like not in a toddler age, but when they're getting to the age of like 10, 12 and above, then we do see I've seen kids with high blood pressure and definitely high cholesterol.
And do you treat them? Like, do you give them the medication that the adults are on?
It depends on how high their cholesterol is or how high their blood pressure is. Most of the cases I see, fortunately, are not high enough where we have to use medicines, but it's something we just keep an eye on, and we talk about these interventions as far as improving their diet and being more active, and then we'll periodically check it. But there are kids that need to be on medicines for that, for high cholesterol or for high blood pressure, and usually I'll send them to a specialist.
Okay.
In kids, we typically send them to a specialist if they have high cholesterol, a cardiologist typically.
Really?
Instead of managing it. We typically don't manage high cholesterol the way like your internist or something would for an adult.
Okay, all right. So high cholesterol, hypertension.
Right. High cholesterol, which in turn leads to coronary artery disease, heart disease, can increase the risk of strokes as well. Type 2 diabetes, sleep apnea is another one. Cancer. There's been certain kinds of cancers like colon cancer, thyroid cancers, esophageal cancer that are linked to obesity. Reflux.
I was just going to come
We mentioned that last week, I think, or a couple weeks ago. Asthma also associated with obesity. Depression. Liver disease. Blount disease.
Oh my.
Skiffy.
What is
precocious puberty.
What is skiffy?
Skiffy is a problem they can have with their hip joints. And same thing with blount disease. It has to do just with kids being overweight, and they can get problems with their growth plates, with their bones, with hip joints, or with their lower bones, the tibia. So that's blount disease. But those are all related to just the mechanical stress of carrying so much weight on your bones and joints. And sometimes you get problems with your growth plates in kids who are still growing.
Still growing. Oh, goodness. That's terrible.
Yeah, that's some of them. That's not a comprehensive list by any means, but those are some of the major things we see with obesity.
So no wonder that it's such a huge public health crisis if it leads to so much. So let's talk a little bit about diabetes. So obese kids tend to develop diabetes?
They can develop diabetes, and typically what we see, we're looking for something called acanthosis nigricans, which they start doing a screening in schools for a lot of times. And you can see like a kind of a brown velvety patch on their neck, and that means they have signs of insulin resistance, and they're at risk for diabetes. It's kind of what we call pre-diabetes.
Okay.
So we see that a lot in kids. Like they haven't had full-blown diabetes yet, but we're seeing the signs of it, that they're starting to develop it.
And then once you develop diabetes, you have it for life.
Yes, if you've got diabetes, I mean, you can control it by your diet. But yes, if you develop it, then you've got diabetes.
Okay. Doc, what kind of psychosocial implications does childhood obesity have on the child?
We mentioned a little bit of that earlier.
Depression.
Yeah, depression, low self-esteem. And then another thing that doesn't get mentioned a lot is bullying at school. So that's another a very common problem in kids at school. Kids who are overweight get bullied, and that can contribute to low self-esteem and depression. And then, like we mentioned before, that can, sometimes those kids, when they feel stressed out or feel depressed, and they eat more to cope with it. So it's a vicious cycle like that.
Does childhood obesity and bulimia go hand in hand, or no, totally different?
Bulimia? if someone was obese and then they lost weight and they want to maintain that weight, then they may, start doing things like that, like excessive things like vomiting and things like that.
Okay.
But typically, the people that we see with bulimia are not overweight usually.
Okay.
Usually they want to stay thin. So typically I don't see them as being overweight. Maybe they may have been overweight in the past. And then because they don't want to get back to that point, they do extreme measures to stay thin.
Okay. All right. And so now you have an obese child. How would you treat the child? What are some short-term and long-term measures or interventions that you can take?
Well, I would say the short and long-term measures they're pretty much they're one and the same, I think, for treatment of this. But the treatment of obesity has to be a comprehensive treatment for the entire family. It's not just for the child. It has to be a change in lifestyle for the whole household.
Okay.
So, we talked about eating healthy. So that has to be, parents have to be buying healthy foods and making healthy foods and trying to cut down on eating fast food and things like that.
So when you say eating healthy foods and buying healthy foods, what does that mean? Can you give some specific examples?
More fruits and vegetables and less processed foods like TV dinners and things like that. Less fast food. Basically, it's more fruits and vegetables, more chicken and fish as far as meat items.
Okay, more chicken and fish. Okay, and less oil, less salt, less fried foods.
Exactly. The way you prepare it also, like if you're having baked chicken, or baked fish. So those are basically, as far as meat goes, basically chicken and fish is going to be healthier than red meat. So you want to keep your red meat intake to a minimum. And then also the portion size is important.
Okay.
Because the recommended amount is a deck of cards for the size of what you eat.
A deck of cards.
Yes.
So that's about 4 ounces. So none of those 16-ounce steaks.
Yeah, that's like 4 times what you need. So
Okay.
So portion control is a big thing. So it's not just what you're eating, but how much of it you're eating.
So a lot of time, and as parents in general, we say, finish what's on your plate, right? Or don't waste your food. All the
Right.
starving children in the world kind of spiel that we give our kids. So is that good? I mean, are we sort of teaching our kids to overeat?
I think we do have a tendency to teach our kids to overeat, but I don't think finishing your plate's a bad thing. It just depends on what you start off with in your plate in the beginning.
Okay.
So you want to have a plate where you have plenty of fruits and vegetables, and you're not sticking it full of unhealthy foods or tons of meat and then telling them to finish it. So from the beginning, you should be trying to eat healthy, and then you want them to finish their food. So it depends on what's in your plate.
Okay, great point. So give them, what's appropriate rather than overstuffing them and
Right.
then expect them to finish it.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, you don't want to put like 3 hamburgers on there and say, finish your plate.
Right. Okay. So you're talking about lifestyle changes. So it has to be one that the whole family has to make. So eat
Right.
healthy, number
Right.
one.
Eating healthy. And then secondly is being active. So we try to shoot for at least 1 hour physical activity a day.
Okay.
And it could be things like walking, jogging, biking, swimming, some sort of cardiovascular activity. And doing it as a family is good, going for a walk or swimming or biking, whatever. So that makes everyone healthy as well as child and parents. And it kind of creates a culture of where you're being active and doing it as part of a family thing, and encourages people to do it as opposed to just telling your child you need to be more active and go do some exercise. So you're
Right.
setting a good example. And then
Maybe
others
take a yoga class together.
Yeah, that's a good point. Any kind of class or organized sports is also good for kids because it keeps them on a schedule and to have regular practices and games. So that's a good option as well. And other small things that you can do is, we talked about TV being a contributing factor to obesity, is setting limits on TV time. Usually we recommend no more than 2 hours of screen time in a day, and take the TV, if they have a TV in their bedroom, to take it out of their bedroom. And then we talked about earlier about trying to have family meal time together as much as possible.
Okay. What about any drug interventions that you all do? And what do you think about weight loss surgery for kids?
As far as drugs, I've never seen a child prescribed medicine, any of the weight loss drugs that we use in adults, because they're not approved for kids, and not really, the side effects are not studied in kids. So that's not typically an option that we use.
What about Weight Watchers or any one of those programs? Are those recommended for kids?
Yeah, I mean, if it's just helping you have a healthy diet and keeping track of it, then that's fine. But I don't recommend any of the fad diets like Atkins diets or whatever the other fads are. So we don't recommend any of the fad diets. But if it's just a program to help you, keep track of calories and things like that, I think that's fine to use in older kids, in teens or kids who are like 12 and above.
Okay. And so no drugs?
No drugs.
No drugs. What about weight loss surgery? Recommended for kids?
It's kind of a last resort, and only for teenagers. I've never heard of it done in younger kids.
And we're talking about gastric bypass or
right.
lap band.
Right.
Okay.
So I've seen it occasionally for teens. I've never personally recommended anyone for that. But it is an option as a last resort if you've done everything and nothing else is working. So it has been done in teenagers before, but it's something you'd have to take on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. What about, would you recommend any counseling or any support groups that you know of?
Yeah. A lot of hospitals have weight loss programs. One that I use a lot is called the Coach Clinic at Children's Medical Center of Dallas. And they have a comprehensive program where they will work with a physician. A lot of times it's an endocrinologist and then a dietitian. And they have classes to help them, educate them about foods to eat that are healthy, and help them get together for exercise and have peer groups where they can discuss things. So that definitely helps. If you're with people like that who are going through the same thing, but just having a more regimented schedule and program to help you with this, it definitely helps you in losing weight and managing this.
Okay, good to know. And I think the parents have to be educated in how to deal with a child who
and a lot of these programs, the classes are not just for the kids, but they're for the parents as well. And a lot of times they take these classes together. So a lot of things they're doing together, the child and the parent together.
Right.
So that's very important. Like I said, it's not just the child, it's the whole house. So the parents have to be involved.
Okay.
And, the first step is they have to recognize the problem, and then they have to be willing to initiate the change.
So if you are thinking about that, I think my child is getting a little heavy. So what should you do?
You should go see your pediatrician, and like we talked about, we would plot them out on the graph and kind of see where their BMI is, and that'll kind of give us an idea of where they're at and where we want them to be.
Okay.
So that would be the first step.
That would be the first step. Okay, excellent. And then, like you said, it's a whole family lifestyle change. Eat together, exercise together, eat healthier meals, limit the number of times that you're eating outside, and cook at home, and get your kids involved. Maybe one can cut the cucumber or set up the salad or whatever. Have your kids plan the meal so then they are more interested in what's cooking at home rather than what is being served at Chipotle. And vary the activities and help your kids who are going through childhood obesity, because like you said, it can cause a lot of issues like bullying and depression and low self-esteem. So the child needs a lot of help.
Right. That's a good point. And it's important to be positive, for the parents to be positive with their child and not to be critical. And you want to set small, manageable goals and try to attain those goals, and always try to be positive, and don't ever single them out or criticize them for being overweight, because that usually just makes things worse. So you want to be positive, encourage them, and then be a good role model yourself and try to take on those habits yourself, so you're all doing it together. Right.
So it's one thing to say turn the TV off and you're stuck to the TV.
Right, exactly.
Watching all those dramas. What a problem it really is. More than 1/3 of children and adolescents are overweight or obese. This is according to 2012 statistics.
Right.
So, it's a very, very sad issue, and I'm hoping that it can be addressed in a very, very comprehensive manner by educators, by the government, and by parents ourselves.
So that's a good point also that you mentioned. We talked a little bit about lack of PE at school, but one of the other major issues that's been in the news recently is the school lunches. So usually school lunches are typically not very healthy. And we know that Michelle Obama has tried to change that and has set some guidelines to try to create healthier school lunches.
Right.
And I think what she's doing is great, because I think you need a comprehensive program like that. And a lot of times, even if you're eating healthy at school, but then your child goes to school and they eat unhealthy meals there. So it's got to be at home and at school.
Yeah.
It's got to be a comprehensive plan.
Sure. Okay, because they have all the Chick-fil-A alternatives at school. They don't like what's on the school menu. They have the Chick-fil-A alternative.
Right, and a lot of some of the schools have vending machines, and if the kids don't like what's at school, they'll eat chips or soda for lunch. Yeah, so if you give them other options like that. So it's met with some backlash, I think, and because...
especially by the kids who are like, that school lunch is just bad.
Yeah, because they're used to eating, high-fat, high-calorie foods. So it's hard to do that suddenly and just say if they're eating hamburgers and pizza, then one day you give them fruits and vegetables.
Right.
It's hard to make that change overnight.
What do you do with kids who just don't like fruits and vegetables?
You just have to try your best and be persistent. And I think you mentioned a good point about trying to get kids involved in cooking or picking out the foods. And I think they'll be probably more willing to try different things if they were more involved in it, rather than you just trying to force feed them certain things. Like eat your broccoli, or you're not going to get up off the table. That's not a good approach usually. It doesn't work typically.
The biggest line in my household is, look, taste buds changed, so you may have different taste buds today, so just give it a try. Yeah, sometimes you have to keep,
offering the food before the kids will, especially for little ones, before they'll try it.
I keep reminding them how they hated ice cream when they were really little,
Really?
And now they love ice cream.
That's the first time I've heard of kids hating ice cream.
Well, one of my kids refused to eat ice cream, and I'm like, see, so taste buds change. That just tells you.